I didn't even cry when they gave her my office. I just stood there a minute watching her roll her chair and adjust the blinds like she owned the sun. That corner office, I picked the layout. The paint. I fought for the natural light when they wanted to save on glass. I still remember the email. Subject line: welcome Kayla, smiley face at the end. Sent to all staff. Nobody said anything to me. I only found out when I came in early like always and saw her name outside the door. Kayla Monroe. Marketing Strategy Executive Associate. I was the one who wrote that title 2 years ago when we were hiring for a junior role, but now she had my seat. My view. My name scrubbed from the glass. They said it was realignment. Said they needed fresh direction, new energy. Thomas, the CEO, he smiled when he said that. Patted my shoulder. Told me I was irreplaceable, but then asked me to help onboard her. Just walk her through the decks, he said. Show her the ropes, like only you can. So I did. I showed her the decks. The archives. The system quirks I learned the hard way at 2 a.m. on deadline nights when she was still in college. She called me a goldmine, said I was a legend. Said she hoped to be half the leader I was. Week 2 she started leading the calls. Week 3 they added her to the exec Slack channel. Mine got archived quietly a month later. I still had my badge. Still had my title. Still had the chipped mug on my desk from the 2018 retreat in Breckenridge. But people stopped CCing me on decisions they used to run by me first. They started saying Kayla's team when referring to the same team I built from scratch during the pandemic. 3 years ago, I held that team together with duct tape and midnight edits. When our CMO quit, I filled in unofficially, no title, no bump, just duty. And they let me. Let me carry the weight until they found someone younger, shinier, with better Instagram filters. Kayla smiled in every meeting. Wore bright lipstick. Used words like intention and alignment with perfect pacing. Thomas loved her. He said she brought spark. I used to bring stability. Apparently they didn't need that anymore. Then one day she repeated something I wrote word for word in the all-hands deck I'd prepped for Q3. We don't sell products. We sell trust in the moments people didn't know they needed it. The whole room nodded. Someone even clapped. Thomas looked proud. Told her it was brilliant. She thanked him like she believed it was hers. I didn't say a word, just sat there pen in hand watching her take a bow on a stage I built. It's funny how people forget who set the foundation once the furniture looks new. That day, she passed by my desk with a coffee and said, "They loved the pitch. I think we've really hit something." I smiled. Told her I was glad. What else was I supposed to say? He used to say that about me too. Before she walked in. Would that have changed anything? Have you ever been asked to train the person who's already taken your place? To hand over the keys and then stand at the door like a guest? I did it. Quietly, completely. And that's when I learned silence doesn't mean surrender. It means I'm watching. Taking notes. Waiting. Because some truths don't need to be shouted, they just need to be documented. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom 10 minutes early. The air was too cold. The coffee pot was still hissing. And there they were, 12 glossy copies already waiting at each seat. Glossy, bound, branded with her name. I saw it sitting on the conference table before she walked in. 12 copies. Neatly stacked, one at each seat. I didn't need to flip it open. I knew what was inside. The title page said Southwest Market Reimagining Expansion. Subtitle: A Vision by Kayla Monroe. But that vision was mine. 2 months of Saturdays spent at my kitchen table with sticky notes, market maps, cold leftover pad thai balanced beside my laptop. I was the one who mapped flight corridor overlaps with franchise proximity. I was the one who called every regional lead asking what they needed that HQ kept ignoring. That deck was built from my nights. My questions, my numbers, and now it was her signature on the final slide. I walked into the room, took my usual seat, and smiled like it didn't matter. She was already mid-conversation with Thomas laughing about something that wasn't funny. He looked up, saw me, and gave a quick nod. No hello. Just that kind of polite neutral acknowledgement you give the janitor who's been there for years. Kayla started the presentation. Clicker in hand, bright blazer. Hair in that messy bun people think looks effortless but takes work. Slide by slide she walked them through my strategy. Same structure, same phrasing. Even the call-out box with that stat I pulled from a regional podcast no one else had heard of. She kept going. Polished. Poised. And then she paused. It was the Arizona chart. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. The stat was wrong. She flipped too fast. I leaned forward just enough to whisper. 23% drop in Q2 foot traffic. Not 17. She blinked. Nodded. Then said it aloud like she'd just remembered. Thomas smiled. Didn't look at me. I got a Slack message before the meeting ended. From him. Just a single sentence. Isn't she a breath of fresh air? I stared at the screen. Didn't respond. I looked back at the table. All those copies. All those colors. My work, her initials. I stayed in that room just long enough for the clapping to stop. Then I gathered my notes, the ones no one read, and left. I didn't say anything after the meeting. Just walked back to my desk, mug and hand badge clipped to my belt loop like always. She stopped by an hour later. Said, hope I didn't step on your toes. I just loved your framework so much I couldn't help but be inspired. Inspired. That was the word. That was the word they all used when they meant I took your work and made it mine. I smiled. Small. Tight, told her, no worries. It's all part of the team, right? Then, I opened my email. Found the draft I'd sent Thomas back in May. Subject line Southwest Strategy, preliminary only. Time-stamped. With a spreadsheet link, with voice notes. With slides that looked almost identical to the ones she passed off as hers. I didn't forward it to him. Not yet. I forwarded it to myself. My personal Gmail, created a folder on my desktop. Called it insurance. Then I started digging. Old Slack threads. Meeting minutes. Even calendar invites where my name had been replaced with hers. Sometimes they didn't even bother to change the time zone. Just hit copy, paste. Let me know if you've ever felt this. Not fired. Not demoted. Not even yelled at. Just slowly folded out of the frame. And everyone pretending you were still in the picture. That week, Becca from HR passed me in the hallway. She used to smile, used to stop ask about my mom. Now she looked at her phone like I was part of the wall. I wanted to ask, had she seen the pitch deck? Did she know it was mine? Was she told to stay out of it, or did she just not want to get involved? But I didn't ask. Because I knew the answer. I didn't stop with the pitch deck. Started scrolling back through shared drives, old backups, those half-buried folders from last year's campaign season, and there it was. Kessler, Campaign Q3. Draft 2. My old naming style. Even the typos matched. She hadn't even bothered to rename the file. Just changed the owner. Changed the voice. Changed the credit. Noelle, the new intern, slid by my desk around 4 that day. She peeked in, held up a folder, and asked, "Hey, did you want me to loop Kayla in on the Minnesota case study draft?" I blinked. Took a breath. Then said, "You can copy her. But send it to me first." She nodded fast. Didn't ask why. Smart girl. She'll go far if she learns what I didn't. That night I opened a fresh notes doc. Started typing dates, phrases, slides, Zoom links. All the things you can't fake in a deposition. They always say don't get mad, get organized. So I did. I got organized. By midnight, my insurance folder had 12 subfolders, 5 PDFs, and a spreadsheet that mapped every major strategic memo I'd authored since 2020. I even downloaded the file history log from our CMS system. Highlighted my edits. Her copies. My phrasing. Her polish. Side by side. Black and white. Truth doesn't need makeup. Somewhere between row 48 and 49 I stopped. Looked around my apartment. Dim light. Old couch. Same chipped coffee table from grad school. No framed degrees. No press plaques. But I had my name on every single document they were building her career on, and that was going to be enough. For now. I closed my laptop. Tucked my mug into the sink. The one from the intern who called me mentor for life before Google scooped her up. Then I turned off the light, paused, and renamed the folder. Not insurance. Kayla Monroe, credits pending. Next Monday was a team-wide sync. She didn't know I'd be joining, and she definitely didn't know what was already queued in the slide deck. They called it Kayla's big day. The group chat buzzed the night before. Even Thomas dropped a little fire emoji. The calendar invite had her name in bold Q1 strategy presentation, led by Kayla Monroe. Funny thing is, I built the template, picked the color palette, timed the transitions. Even the slide layout. She used my slides. Just changed the font. Swapped my cover image for a Shutterstock photo of a smiling woman in a red blazer. I wore that same blazer last year. Same shade, same brand, different story. The boardroom smelled like strawberries. Someone had opened the fruit platter too early. Zoom screen flickered overhead, soft home lighting muted mics, half smiles from remote execs. I took my seat 2 rows back. Same spot I sat when I was still the one they introduced first. Kayla walked in 10 minutes early. Red blazer. Ponytail too tight, smile too wide like someone trying to stay afloat. She caught my eye. Nodded. Didn't say a word, that was new. I opened my notebook. The old one. Ivory pages, spine cracked from years. Little initials in the margins. AK. One for every sentence she ever borrowed. Thomas walked in next. Hair slicked. Smile ready. He clapped once, just loud enough for the Zoom echo to catch it. "Let's give Kayla the floor," he said, like it had ever been taken from her. She stood. Smoothed her jacket. Clicked the remote. Slide 1 lit up, repositioning for growth, a fresh vision. Subtitle presented by Kayla Monroe. But I knew that vision. Knew every line before she said a word. I took a sip of lemon water and waited. Slide ba, then slide 4. Same bullet points, same rhythm. The only thing that changed was the voice. At minute 10, she hesitated. The graph on operating margins came up and her eyes flicked sideways. I knew what was missing. The forecast note at the bottom. She'd cut it for space, but now the CFO was frowning. She looked at me. Just a second. Barely a breath. I didn't move. Didn't blink. Just watched. She looked down again and made something up on the spot. It didn't land. Thomas laughed anyway. Clapped again before the first round of Q&A even started. I watched the Zoom squares light up as board members unmuted one by one. Soft questions. Safe questions. Questions she knew I had written. And then it happened. Noelle, the junior analyst who still triple-checked every report, raised her hand. She asked about the Q4 discrepancy in the Arizona numbers. The same one Kayla had fumbled last month. Then she said it. Didn't Adrienne flag that back in November? Silence. For half a beat. Long enough to notice. Kayla smiled too quickly. Thomas cleared his throat. Let's keep the focus on today's presenter. Noelle apologized. Shrank in her seat. I took another sip of lemon water. Wrote one word in the margin of my notes. Flagged. Tiny. Right next to the initials AK. You could feel it in the room. A shift. Not big, but just enough. Enough for me. After the meeting, everyone stood up. Chairs scraped. Empty cups clinked against the table. Kayla walked over, still wearing that stretched smile. She said, "Thanks for being there. Just knowing you were in the room made me feel steadier." I nodded. Just enough, not a word more. She didn't mention Noelle's question. Didn't ask if she got the numbers right. I left before Thomas circled back. The hallway felt cooler than usual, like the building itself could tell something was shifting under the surface. Back at my desk, I plugged in my headphones, opened the offline folder nobody knew existed. Clicked on the real presentation. The one with my name in the metadata. Board, Prep, 2023, Real, PPTX, not Kayla, Final, not the version with the colors and the rounded transitions. I read through every slide. Checked the notes she deleted. Listened again to the voice memos I had recorded for myself back in January. Every trace. Every file. Labeled, archived, dated. No one noticed I was still here. Quiet. Underneath it all. No one realized I didn't need the spotlight to see who was acting. That night I peeled a small post-it and stuck it to the corner of my screen. Purple ink. Slanted handwriting. A line from my ex-husband. The only man who ever knew I wasn't just good at surviving. Keep everything in writing. Especially when they say it's just a formality. I leaned back in my chair. Listened to the wind outside the window. The city kept moving, and so did I. She still thinks I'm training her. I'm actually preparing her exit. It came on a Monday. Of course it did. Subject line: proposed succession outline. No greeting, no context. Just that. I clicked it open before I even finished my first sip of coffee. Becca from HR was looping me in on a proposed knowledge transfer plan. Her words. Not mine. No title change, no termination. Just a paragraph that said, it would be helpful if you could begin outlining your key processes and team workflows for long-term continuity. I read that sentence 3 times. It didn't sting. Not anymore. I'd stopped expecting clarity from people who had already decided I was no longer useful. The snow outside had turned to sleet. April in Denver always fooled you. Spring bloomed in the grocery store aisles, but outside the sidewalks still bit your ankles. I looked at the corner of my screen. 11:42 a.m. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. Not to type. Just to feel the weight of waiting. It was Becca who once told me, "You're like the lighthouse here. Always steady, always on." Now she was the one gently pushing me toward shore. The attached document had sections, pre-filled. Some with placeholders. Some already titled, Overview of Legacy Projects, Leadership Style and Communication Preferences. Recommendations for Successor. Integration. I didn't cry. Didn't get up from my desk. Didn't forward it to anyone. I just sat there watching the sleet stripe sideways across the windows, like even the weather had something to say about how this ended. They didn't fire me, they didn't demote me. They just gave me a clean little frame to disappear inside of. And then they asked me to sign it. I didn't respond to Becca's email. Not right away. At 1:03 p.m. a message pinged in the team chat. Kayla Monroe added a celebration. New title update underneath a stream of replies. Clapping emojis. Confetti gifs. Someone wrote, "Well-deserved, Kayla." I scrolled. No mention of me. Not a tag. Not a thanks to Adrienne. Just one line she posted herself. So excited to step into this next chapter, grateful for the incredible foundation that brought us here. Vague enough to sound humble. Sharp enough to erase names. I minimized the chat. Stared at the corner of my screen again. 2:07 p.m. At lunch, I took the long route back from the cafe. Past the glass hallway that ran along the 9th floor. My floor, or it had been. I saw her standing inside my old office, laughing with 2 visitors. Touring them like it was hers. Like it always had been. She touched the corner shelf where I once kept my annuals from grad school. She pointed to the window I'd fought to keep in the redesign. She gestured toward the standing desk Thomas said was too premium until I convinced him every exec needed one. Now it was hers. The view. The light. The tone of ownership without the weight of memory. I didn't go in. Didn't wave. I just kept walking, paper bag in hand, muffin getting cold. At the elevator, I tapped my badge. The reader blinked red. Not green. Red. Again. Same result. I tried the 8th floor. Green. Back down. Back into the place they still let me access. I didn't ask IT, didn't file a ticket. I knew what this was. They didn't take my title, they just shrunk the map of where I was allowed to stand. That night, I didn't turn on the lights when I got home. Just the hallway lamp. Warm low barely enough to see the hardwood I'd refinished myself 2 summers ago. I dropped my bag on the chair, pulled the laptop from its sleeve. Plugged in. No music, no television. Just the soft hum of the old ceiling fan and the occasional rustle of tree branches tapping the window. I opened the master file index, the one no one knew I had, structured by year, by department, by campaign. Everything with names, dates, versions, timestamps, voice memos. Internal drafts they never bothered to version correctly. I labeled it back in January before any of this began. But that night I renamed the folder core, archive, final, zip. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I encrypted it. AES 256. Split key. Cloud backup external drive clone. One version labeled for me. One labeled for insurance. As I typed in the final password, my hands didn't shake. Not even a little, it felt methodical. Like meal prep. Or pruning dead branches before spring. Because I knew what was coming. And this time I wasn't going to be the last to know. It came in at 3:12 p.m. the next day. Subject line Vision 2023. PPTX, for board review. Sent by Kayla, CC'd to Thomas. And the board alias that used to include me. I shouldn't have opened it. I wasn't on the list anymore. But the file was on the shared drive. Left unlocked. Like a dare, I clicked. The title slide glowed up on screen. Vision 2023 Brand Growth Human Focus. Same color scheme, same slide ratio I preferred. Second slide, quote at the bottom. My quote. You don't build markets. You build trust, and the markets follow. Page after page, chart after chart. The same regional layout I mapped over Thanksgiving break. The same persona tree I drew by hand when our UX team missed the deadline. I scrolled. Slower now. Face still jaw-locked. Like someone reading their own obituary. Slide 17. The email capture funnel I tested for weeks using dummy data from my personal site. Slide 24. The visual framework I built with Lauren from design before she left last year. Slide 29. The retention heat map that Kayla once called a little much. Every pixel, every bullet point was mine. She hadn't changed a single line, just moved the logo to the right. And added her name in the bottom left footer. Small font. But bold. Kayla Monroe, Executive Strategy Lead. Not once did I see my name. Not a footnote. Not a line in the appendix. Not a single sentence that said, based on prior drafts by. She had erased me like a stain. I closed the file, didn't cry. Didn't message anyone. Didn't scream into a pillow like I used to in the early days of the unraveling. I just sat there, breathing steady. Shoulders square. Desk lamp buzzing soft in the quiet of an office nobody noticed was still occupied. She thought it was over. That I'd trained her. Stepped back. Faded. But I was still here, just one floor down. With a copy of every deck. Every timestamp. Every file revision backed up 3 ways. The original voice memos. The version logs. Even screenshots of Slack threads where Thomas gave friendly suggestions word for word what she now called her insights. They wanted a handoff. I was building a hand grenade. I renamed the folder that night. Dropped the word archive. Called it contingency, 1. Encrypted it. Twice. Uploaded to cloud 2 different accounts. Private keys stored on a flash drive I slipped behind the plant in the far corner of my living room. Nobody would see it. But I would know. I watched the office lights turn off one by one from my window that night. She had her presentation. Her title. Her version of the story. But I had the receipts. And I wasn't done yet. They opened the Q3 meeting with champagne. Not sparkling water, not coffee in compostable cups. But full flutes of chilled champagne. Kayla laughed as the bubbles rose. She wore red again. Same blazer as the last time she made a scene. Same smile. Thomas stood beside her. Taller than usual somehow, shoulders back. Like this was a coronation. He clinked his glass. Said something about vision, about new frontiers, about passing the torch. And everyone clapped. Because that's what they were there for. To toast what they thought was the future. I didn't drink. Didn't even reach for the glass. I sat in the second row near the edge next to the ficus they always forget to water. My bag was on the floor. My badge clipped at my hip. And in my coat pocket, a flash drive. Small, black. Quiet. The projector flickered once. Then again. Someone adjusted the HDMI cable. Laughed nervously. Don't worry, Kayla said. Tech hiccups just add suspense. The lights dimmed. The first slide lit up the room. Big white letters, Vision 2024, presented by Kayla Monroe. And that's when I felt it. Not rage, not panic. But that kind of stillness right before snow. She spoke like she'd written every word. Like she'd lived it. Felt it. Owned it. The Southwest rollout, she said, was only the beginning. Slide changed. Numbers appeared. All familiar. Do familiar. We increased regional engagement by 47%. She smiled by listening first, acting second. The phrasing. Mine. That line came from my draft dated the 16th of April. She clicked again. A timeline appeared. Color-coded. Layered. Meticulous. I had built that timeline on a Saturday while my neighbor's dog barked for 2 hours straight and my Wi-Fi kept cutting out. But no one else knew that. To them, she was just prepared. Dynamic. Thomas leaned forward, nodded along like he was watching a TED Talk. I wondered if he even remembered who pulled the data behind those graphs. My name wasn't on any of it. Of course not. But I could see the echoes. Margins set exactly to 0.8. Same font. Same order of bullets. I hadn't said a word. Not once. Not yet. But my hand was in my coat pocket, fingers brushing against the flash drive. Still cool. Still there. Across the room, a junior associate, Mia, maybe, fiddled with a notepad. Her eyes darted between the screen and me. She didn't know the whole story, but she knew enough. You can always tell when someone senses the air is off. Kayla clicked again. Final slide, company logo. Underneath it, presented by Kayla Monroe, Director of Strategy. Applause. Not thunderous, but full. Approving. Thomas was the first to stand. He clapped like it was his name on the screen. And maybe in some way it was. Kayla turned slightly as if searching for acknowledgement. Her eyes found me. I smiled. Soft. Still. And that's when I stood up, not rushed. Not dramatic. Just enough to shift the silence. Sorry, I said, just loud enough to cut through the clapping. Looks like the projector skipped a slide. Thomas frowned. Kayla turned, eyes narrowing like she didn't quite follow. I stood up. No rush. No asking. Just moved. A few chairs shifted toward me. The room's air changed, not in words, but in the way someone held their breath. I didn't look at Kayla. Didn't look at Thomas either. I walked to the console. Bent slightly. Plugged in the flash drive. The little light blinked. Soft ding. Recognized. The screen stuttered once. The celebratory slide disappeared, replaced by a plain white one. Black font. No flourish. Document history. Authorship. Adrienne Kessler. Created May 3, 2023. Modified the 14th of June 2023. Owner A. Kessler, at. Accessed by K. Monroe, at the 9th of August. 2023. No one spoke. I could feel their eyes. Even the projector seemed to buzz louder in the silence. Then the next slide loaded. Email threads. Subject: Southwest Strategy Draft Attachments. Q3, Vision, 1. PPTX, Market Deep Dive, 2. XLSX. From Adrienne Kessler to Thomas Vance. Date May 11, 2023. 9:24 p.m. The file thumbnails appeared, matching the ones Kayla had just presented. Slide by slide. Same colors. Same order. Same typos I hadn't corrected yet in draft 2. I didn't say a word. I just stepped back, took my seat again, crossed one leg over the other, and waited. Would you have let them keep going, or would you have done this? Because in rooms like that you only get one moment to tell the truth without ever raising your voice. Kayla didn't move. Not even a blink. Her hand stayed frozen mid-gesture, still holding the clicker as if the next slide might save her. Thomas shifted first. Cleared his throat, reached for his water. Didn't drink it. Just touched the rim. Then looked to me like I'd violated some unspoken decorum by presenting facts too plainly. The boardroom stayed silent, except for a chair creaking near the back. That's when Miss Gallant spoke. One of the more senior members. Always wore navy. Never missed a quarterly. She leaned forward slightly and said, "Who signed off this version?" Not accusatory, not warm either. Just cold interest. Like she was tracing a paper trail in real time. Thomas opened his mouth, closed it again. Kayla looked at him, then back at the screen, and for a moment she looked like a kid who'd practiced a performance and forgot the lines halfway through. I didn't say anything, just took a sip of lemon water from my glass. Set it down gently. My notes were still in front of me. No need to open them. Everything that needed to be said was already up there on full display. Then someone, I think it was a junior board member, coughed. An awkward sound. The kind that doesn't know what to do with itself. Another asked quietly, "Is this standard protocol?" Thomas finally found his voice. He smiled. Thin, practiced. "Well, I believe there's been some miscommunication." Clearly there was collaboration. But no one nodded, no one echoed him. The projector still glowed with my name. And Kayla, for the first time since she arrived, looked down. Hands trembling just enough for me to notice. Not enough for her to admit it. She turned off the clicker. Placed it on the table. Didn't say thank you, didn't say anything. Sometimes the loudest moment in a room is when nobody says a word. When the meeting finally ended, there was no clapping. Just chairs scraping gently as people stood without making eye contact. Thomas didn't say a word to me as he packed his folder. Didn't even offer one of those tight fake smiles he was known for. Kayla lingered a second longer. Still in red. Still trying to look composed. She glanced at me on her way out, and I saw it. Not anger, not shame. Recognition. The kind that only comes when someone realizes they weren't just outshined, they were never the brightest thing in the room to begin with. She looked at me like a mirror cracking from the inside. Not all at once, but just enough that it would never look whole again. I packed my notes slowly. Slipped the flash drive back into my coat pocket. No rush. Outside, the sun was dipping behind the skyline. That soft amber light Denver gets just before the cold settles in. I didn't walk to the elevator with anyone. Didn't wait for validation. Instead, I took the stairs. One floor at a time. Each step quiet, measured, mine. Because while they toasted false beginnings, I had just delivered a quiet ending, the kind that doesn't need applause. Just a closed door, a flash drive, and a room that will never see me the same way again. I stepped into the elevator, still holding the flash drive. I didn't look back. Not at Thomas. Not at Kayla. Let them stare at the screen a little longer. Let them wonder what else I had queued up. The elevator was empty. Just me and my reflection in the stainless steel. Blank face, calm eyes, steady breath. It dropped one floor. That's all. Just one floor, but it felt like crossing a border between noise and silence, between spotlight and the shadows backstage. This was the floor they moved me to. Quiet. Forgotten. Like a side storage they didn't want to clean up yet. My heels echoed as I walked down the hall. Soft carpet muted the sound, but I could still feel the rhythm of something ending. I opened the door to my office. Well, my current one. The room with no windows. No nameplate, just a desk, a lamp, and a chair with a slight lean to the left. It used to be a break room. Or maybe a file room. No one ever said. There was a draft in the corner. The vent rattled when it got cold. I used to mind. Now I just listen to it. I set my bag down, unzipped it, slipped the flash drive back into its hidden pocket, and then I sat. Just sat. The walls felt too beige. Too clean in that clinical, impersonal way, like a hotel room after the guests have left. That was the feeling. Like I was the person who stays behind to fold the chairs after a wedding reception. She wasn't invited to, even though she bought the cake, booked the band, and handwrote the place cards for guests who never learned her name. I leaned back, looked up at the ceiling, listened to the hum of the building above. Somewhere Kayla was probably still upstairs, smiling, explaining, spinning, and Thomas probably on his second glass of champagne. Trying to pivot, trying to erase what just happened by calling it a learning moment, but down here no one needed a script. No one clapped, it was just me. And the facts. And the long slow silence after the music ends. That weekend no one emailed. Not Thomas. Not Becca from HR. Not even the junior team who usually sent gifts and recap threads within an hour of any all hands. Slack was silent. Like a door closed, but not slammed. Just quietly, carefully, shut. By Monday, a few team members looked my way in the kitchen. Not long enough to meet my eyes. Just long enough to wonder if they should say something. They didn't. Someone had rearranged the snack shelf. Kayla's kombucha wasn't there. I poured my coffee. Used my chipped mug. The one from the 2018 retreat. The hallway smelled different. No perfume. No rose gold laughter floating through the glass. At 10:42 a.m. I got an email from Kayla. Subject line about last week. No greeting. No apology. Just a paragraph that said, I realize now I should have clarified the origins of the deck. I regret not acknowledging your contributions sooner. I hope we can both move forward with mutual respect for the work we've done. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I added it to the folder. Same one as the slide history. The authorship log. The timestamped edits and the training documents I wrote she used without blinking. I labeled this one K. Monroe, Correspondence, 04. Then I closed the tab, sipped my coffee, and opened a different window. Not Slack, not email. A blank document, a title page. Header Proposal Independent Strategy Services, Adrienne Kessler. Below that is single line, clarity is currency. The phrase I used to teach my interns, the one Kayla once borrowed but never understood. Tuesday morning my inbox pinged. Not Slack. Not internal. Not filtered through layers of approval. It was direct. From a name I hadn't seen in 2 years. Leslie H. Regional Director, Retail Partnerships. We'd worked together back when no one was sure if physical stores would survive. Back when I wrote playbooks overnight while her region stayed open through storms. Her subject line read, Remembered your clarity. That was it. The email said, We've been trying to rework our Q1 strategy. Got caught in loops, buzzwords, and big egos. Then I remembered something you once said, let's solve the real problem before we name it. Would you be open to consulting short-term? I trust your eye. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, not because I doubted, but because I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen for the thing I did best, not the person I trained to take credit for it. I typed back I'd love to reconnect. Let's start with a 45-minute clarity call. No slides. Just real questions. She replied within 10 minutes. Booked for Friday. I added her name to a new folder, First Clients, AK. Then I opened my notebook. The one with the soft leather cover. No logos. No company branding, just mine. And I wrote 3 lines at the top of a fresh page. I hear what they don't say. I ask what no one wants to. I don't need a mic to make a point. Thursday afternoon, I attended a small networking event. Not a panel, not a boardroom. Just folding chairs, lukewarm tea, and real conversations. I almost didn't go. But something in me, the part that wasn't done listening, said yes. That's where I met her. Jasmine. Fresh out of grad school, bright eyes. Worn notebook. Nervous pen tap. She asked thoughtful questions. Waited for the answers. Wrote down what others ignored. I watched her the way I once watched people who seemed untouchable. She reminded me of me before the walls went glass, before the silence became armor. She said, "I've followed your work for a while. That regional rollout you built in 2020. It got me through my thesis." I blinked. That rollout hadn't had my name on it in any public channel. But she knew. She saw. We spoke for 15 minutes. She asked if she could send over a portfolio. I said, "Don't send it. Bring it. I've got a project I'd like you to lead." She looked startled. Skeptical, grateful. I handed her my card. Not a company card. My own. Adrienne Kessler. Strategy, integrity, light. That weekend, I drafted the proposal. Wrote her name on the title slide. First, then mine. Smaller, below. The way it should have been for me once. This time I got to choose. This time I meant it. The next morning I brewed my own coffee. No communal pot, no burnt bottom carafe in a shared kitchen. Just fresh ground steam curling up in my quiet space. Sunlight spilled across the desk. My name etched clean on the glass door. No confusion. No title fight. Just mine. A new intern was starting that week. Bright, nervous, fresh out of school. She asked if I had time to walk her through the onboarding. I said yes. But this time I let her name go first on the document. I'd learned the value of knowing exactly when to step forward and when to step away. Mid-morning my phone buzzed. It was my daughter. "Mom," she said, "how's the new place?" I looked around. At the plant on the sill. At the calm. At the woman in the glass. "It's quiet," I told her. "But it fits." She laughed. "You sound different." I smiled. "I think I am." Before lunch, a courier dropped off a letter. Handwritten, no sender name. I opened it. The handwriting was familiar. From someone I hadn't heard from in 4 years. Kelsey. She'd been my intern once. Now in management at a nonprofit. She wrote, "I still have the sticky note you left on my monitor. The one that said, 'You don't have to be loud to be strong.' I don't know if you knew how much that line saved me when everyone around me wanted flash instead of follow through." I read it twice. Then tucked it into my notebook. There was a time I thought the only way to survive was to shrink and stay useful. To be behind the curtain. To let others speak while I carried the weight. Not anymore. Some truths don't need a mic. They just need the right room. And when I finally spoke, they heard me. You don't have to make noise to be heard, you just have to know when to speak. Have you ever been replaced by someone who didn't deserve your seat? Would you speak up or let the truth speak for itself? Comment below. We'll be reading.